Well, welcome everybody to the Rice Report, our interview series. We have a returning guest today who all of you loved. So today we are joined by Larry Johnson, who has extensive experience in intelligence and geopolitics. And we're going to be covering a few topics today. It's important to understand that even in the midst of this awakening or changes in this country with Trump in office, we still have a media that's literally lying to us all the time.
Yeah.
And it's important to go to people who have experience looking at official documents from both sides of a story. We get the American version of every story, but many things are different overseas, particularly in the Ukraine-Russia conflict that we're seeing right now. We're going to cover Yemen a little bit here. We have just a half an hour. So Larry, welcome back to the show. We appreciate you being here and taking the time.
Thanks,
and
Eric.
once again, incredible shirt, man. Like I got to get a collection like this. It's got to happen eventually. But let's talk about Ukraine and Russia. What are the things? There is a bifurcation between the story we're being told by our media and what's actually being produced by the Ukrainian and Russian governments. Can you walk us through what's happening right now?
Well, right now, the United States and Russia are trying to come to terms for ending the war. Donald Trump and his team, they wanted a ceasefire, and they're trying to get that as soon as possible. But the Russians are not interested in a ceasefire. They want an end to this war. And from the Russian perspective, this war was provoked by the West. It was started by the West going back to 2014 with the Maidan coup, where the president, the elected president of Ukraine, was overthrown, forced from office, fled to Russia for safety, and then the Western-backed coup leaders ended up installing a new president, Poroshenko, I believe, and they then began launching some very onerous attacks on the people in the Donbass and in Crimea, and particularly in the building in Odessa, they surrounded a labor hall. Supporters of the previous government were herded inside and burned to death. Some of them jumped to their deaths. The people in the Donbass then rose up to fight back. They had Russian support, but it was the people in the Donbass leading the way in the fighting. So Russia's looking at this entire history. There were two ceasefires negotiated under the terms of what were called Minsk I and Minsk II. And the Ukrainians broke both of those. They did so by continuing to shell civilian areas with artillery. And so finally, Russia's looking at this and, no, we're done with ceasefires. We're going to negotiate an end to this. What's interesting this week is both the Ukrainian and the Russian delegations were in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. The United States met with the Ukrainians on Sunday for about an hour and 15 minutes. Then the next day, Monday, they met with the Russians for 12 hours, 12 plus.
Wow.
And then on Tuesday, they met with the Ukrainians for about another hour and 15 minutes. So what do you think's going on? There are serious discussions between the Russians and the Ukrainians, and I mean the Russians and the United States, and the Ukrainians are just being told, here's the deal, you're going to take it. And if they don't take it, then the United States will completely cut off all assistance, and Volodymyr Zelensky won't have a visa into the United States. The essence of this deal that's being negotiated right now concerns the Black Sea. Previously, even during the start of the special military operation in 2022, the Russians allowed grain to be shipped out of Ukraine to Europe. Some of it was supposed to go to Africa. Most of it went to Europe. And in return, the ships that were coming back empty had to be inspected. They were inspected by the Turks. Well, the Turks got paid off. They allowed weapons to be coming back in. So finally, in summer of 2023, the Russians said, hey, enough of this. They put a halt to that deal. So now they're talking about restarting that deal. And the outlines of it are, okay, the grain can be shipped out of Ukraine again. However, this time the inspection of the ships, we're going to do that. The Russians will do the inspection. We'll do it with a joint team. We can have some other international observers, but we're not going to trust anybody else to do this. We'll certify ships aren't carrying weapons, number one. Number two, you guys, you need to lift all the sanctions that are in place right now on Russian grain and Russian fertilizer. So we'll see if that deal goes forward. The Russians say, hey, that's our deal. It's on the table. Take it or leave it.
It's a fairly simple deal, logical request.
Yeah. So if that is accepted, then that will be called the first step towards a peace agreement. But let's recall that the other demands that Russia has that were first enunciated by Vladimir Putin in June of 2024, speaking to a senior group of at the foreign ministry. He said, "Look, these oblasts that were once part of Ukraine that are now part of Russia, Zaporizhia, Kherson, Donetsk, Luhansk. The Ukrainian forces need to withdraw from all of that. They got to pull out, stop military operations in those 4 areas. Well, frankly, if they stop them in those areas, the war is effectively over." And Russia said, and then they got to have a legitimate president in place in Ukraine, because Zelensky, his term was up. He canceled elections and he declared martial law. So the Russians don't view him as a legitimate, lawfully elected leader. And they want to make sure they're dealing with somebody who's got the political backing of the rest of the Ukrainians. So, there are going to be new elections, and foreign aid has to be cut off to Ukraine. And then we can talk about the outlines, basically, of bringing how this war is going to come to an end. Russia has not backed off that 1 inch, and they're not going to back off of that 1 inch. And Trump and Witkoff, though, I think, believe that maybe they can, finagle a deal and fool the Russians again. But the Russians have been bamboozled enough over the last 11 years, and they've decided they're no longer going to be Charlie Brown trying to kick the football that Lucy is holding.
Great analogy.
Yeah.
Yeah, let's rewind a little bit here, because I think most people are confused as to how this conflict actually began. Our media propaganda says that,
Sure.
out of nowhere, Russia just invaded Ukraine for no particular reason. Can you walk us through the history of how this conflict began?
Yeah, probably the first. Let's start 2007. Take you back a little bit in history. Vladimir Putin made a speech at a NATO meeting, I think it was a NATO meeting. It's called the Bucharest Summit, and he said, "Hey, look, we're not going to allow NATO to continue coming to our border, and that means particularly Ukraine and Georgia, not allowed in." Well, the U.S. said, "Oh, basically, screw you. We can do whatever we want." And the next year, they were pushing Georgia to become a member of NATO, and Georgia, at the West instigation, attacked Russia, and the Russians in turn responded, crushed the Georgian attack within 2 weeks. And then the U.S. said, "See, Russia's imperialist. They're trying to take over Europe." It's like some guy's finger poking you in the chest 10 times, and then when you finally punch him in the face, you're the one that started it. No, that's not how this works.
Provocation. The era of great provocation is what we live in.
So then there was this pressure on Ukraine, and Ukraine was close. Under Yushchenko, the Ukrainians were closely tied with Russia. Naturally so. Kiev was sort of the birthplace of Russia 1,000 years ago for Christianity. So it's not like Kiev was some foreign country. The parts of Ukraine have always, what's called Novorossiya, have been parts of Russia for centuries, really. But the West was trying to get Ukraine to move into the Western sphere, and Yushchenko was resisting that. And so the West fomented a coup. The CIA, British MI6, using USAID money, National Endowment for Democracy money. They hired rent-a-crowds. They also brought in some Georgian snipers from outside who started shooting some of the protesters, some of the people gathered in Maidan Square, to make it look like it was the government shooting them, when in fact it was the intelligence community had hired people to do the shooting. That's where the civil war then broke out. The Russians held a vote in Crimea, and the Crimean populace said, hey, we don't want to be part of Ukraine. We've always been part of Russia. We'll go with Russia. The West refused to recognize that election. And then the war in the Donbass got underway in full fury in 2014. In January 2015, the Donbass militias, the militias from Luhansk and Donetsk, defeated the Ukrainian army at a place called Debaltseve. And out of that, the Germans and the French, Merkel and Hollande, oh, we need to have a ceasefire. Please stop. This is enough of the violence. Yeah, they recognized that that Ukraine was going to be forced to surrender, and they wanted to hold that off. They've admitted they got the ceasefire because they wanted to give Ukraine time to recover and rebuild. Mm-hmm. Very cynical. So you jump ahead then to 2022. That here's Russia presented. Actually, it was December 2021. Vladimir Putin presented Joe Biden with a proposed agreement for security with Europe, because here's Russia watching the United States. We've got bases now in Poland and in Romania, and those bases have missile systems that are from the Aegis class that's taken off of a naval vessel. Well, those missile systems are capable of launching nukes at Russia. And remember how we got our panties in a knot over Cuba and the Cuban Missile Crisis. That's right. Russians view it the same way, and so they provided a proposal, and it was rejected. And in fact, Anthony Blinken met with Sergei Lavrov in January, and Lavrov asked him, "Hey, don't put these missiles in there." And Blinken was going to say, "We're going to put missiles any damn place we want, and you can go screw off." That's essentially what he told him. And Lavrov goes, "Okay, understood." And that's why Russia invaded.
And they were, from my understanding, they were invited in by the two Donbass region areas because there was a genocide taking place. But the thing that I find, and I don't know if that's true or not, so I'm just stating.
They had petitioned Russia for support, and Russia provided what I call covert military aid. Russia, prior to February 2024, never sent in official Russian military units to fight under a Russian flag. They were providing military assistance, as we would if we were in a similar situation.
Where they sent in the Wagner group, right? Those who they're contracting.
Right.
Now, the interesting thing that you just said there, because this is also a point of contention, right? So we have a media that's saying Ukraine is holding their own. They're such brave soldiers, and they have a shot against Russia, which they have no shot against Russia. I mean, that's just basic math. But in 2014, the militia of two regions defeated the national army.
Yeah, twice.
Wow.
There was a battle in September of 2014 that led the Donbass militia prevailed in. That was the impetus for the first Minsk I agreement, which was to create a ceasefire. But that ceasefire again was breached primarily by the Ukrainians, who were lobbing artillery shells into civilian areas in Donbass and Donetsk in particular. So then there was a battle at Debaltseve, which is a village, a city that's just north of Donetsk. And there again, the Donbass militia prevailed over the Ukrainian army. They were defeated.
Wow.
And that's when Hollande and Merkel rushed in and convened hastily a conference in Belarus, and Lukashenko and Putin were there as well to sign on to this agreement to establish a ceasefire. But we have now learned later, both Merkel and Hollande admitted, this was to buy Ukraine time. They needed to buy time to build up their military. And what happened in the next 8 years, or 7 years, from 2015 to 2022, is the West, through NATO, the United States, were actively building up the Ukrainian army, making it capable, in their view, of defeating the Russian army and breaking up the Russian Republic.
Wow. I mean, you don't hear that story anywhere that
Nope.
two militias defeated a national army. I think the last time that happened was probably 100 years ago. Modern
Well,
technology makes it pretty tough.
well, we had an experience like that. I think it was like 1776.
Yep. Yes, sir. Memorable times here in this country.
Yeah, I only had 28 relatives that fought in that conflict.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yeah, so I
Mine
can.
hadn't even gotten here yet. I wish they
Yeah,
would have. Yeah. And that by itself was guerrilla warfare with 3% support from society. Only 3% of the men fought.
yeah. The reality was the colonial army under the command of George Washington, they never really won a battle, or
Mhm.
until the final stages. Uh, a lot of the successes, that military successes that took place, particularly in places like North Carolina, South Carolina, and into Virginia, were the result of militias and guerrilla warfare.
Mhm. We had to change our tactics to defeat the enemy.
Yeah,
As always, as always.
yeah,
So in the Russia-Ukraine conflict right now, a quick summary would be we keep hearing that a rare earth minerals deal is done. It may
yeah.
be, I don't know. We keep hearing all kinds of things. There's ceasefire and everyone's ready to settle in, but the actual Russian media coming out from Russia is telling us what you just told us, which is like, yeah, we're willing to end the war, but this is what we want.
Right.
And in reality, that whole region is Russian. It is all Russia. Like you said,
Yeah.
Kiev was the beginning of Russia. Kiev was actually the launch point of Christianity into Norway and some other regions there for the original conversion process. So this is very historical. We've just changed the landscape. And that 2014 coup, rebellion, color revolution, whatever phrase you want to use, that was a big turning point in the world, as far as I can see.
When you go back, so in the 1920s, there were posters up around the new communist government, the Soviet government, but it said Donbass, Serce Rossiya, Donbass, the heart of Russia. And
Mm,
it was the industrial plants that, again, we're seeing this today as one of the reasons the Russians have been proceeding so slowly through this morass of mines and factories, um, is because it's so built up. When the Nazis invaded in World War II in June of 1941, one of the immediate tasks that Stalin assigned was to literally dismantle as many of these factories and industrial plants as possible,
mm.
put them on railroad cars, and ship them to the east of Moscow, past the Ural Mountains, because there they were out of the reach of the Germans. They did that. They moved 16. The Russians moved 16 million people in 6 months. A
Wow.
massive effort, and
In the
the fact,
40s.
yeah, this was 1941. The factories are up and running by the start of 1942. So, I mean, it's just a remarkable accomplishment. Um, Today, this line of contact that's going on in Donbass, it's equivalent to the distance from New York City to Fort Lauderdale, Florida. Okay, 1,200 miles. It's good piece.
Sure.
Uh, or it said in Missouri, where I grew up, it's a fur piece. But um, it is not a matter of just one little army here, one little. This is a massive, massive military operation, and Russia is fighting a proxy war against NATO with with Ukraine caught in the middle, and Ukraine is basically the sacrificial lamb.
Mhm.
And what has happened is the Russians have beat NATO, and NATO's they're going through Kubler Ross's 5 stages of grief. They're still in denial.
That's
You
right.
know,
Well, denial is becoming expensive, right? Aren't the Europeans right now in the process of trying to print off another, I think, $800 billion for the war, and then they're talking about confiscating 10 trillion in citizens' assets that they call unused savings. Like savings are by nature unused. I
right?
don't know how they're unused.
Look, the Europeans are. I describe them like a nasty, mean little dog that's very elderly. So if Mexican Chihuahuas are the worst. These little Chihuahuas. The meaner they are, the longer they live. But they get the place, they only have like one or two teeth.
But they're nasty.
They're just nasty. They're not nice to be around. They're not cuddly. That's Europe. Europe is impotent. Europe doesn't have a single resource, maybe apart from lithography that's used on computer chips, that the West or anybody needs. Mm-hmm. Yeah, they've got some great wine and champagne. Yeah, well, the West likes that, but that's a want, not a need. They're not a financial power anymore. Their economies are sinking. Germany, France, and the UK, where Germany used to be the economic powerhouse in Europe, mm-hmm. Man, it's in full-blown recession, and a lot of its factories are now moving overseas, in part because the cost of energy has gone up, because the United States blew up the Nord Stream pipeline, which was a primary source of cheap energy for them. So Europe is still, they're making all this noise like, yeah, man, we're going to kick your ass, boy, yeah.
No bite, all bark.
Yeah, but it's okay. Step out. Let's get out into the parking lot. They go, oh no, listen, my wife's calling. I got to go ahead. I got to take this. Sorry. Yeah.
I think it's crazy that over the last 25 years, we've been preached like, oh, Europe does it right. Everything Europe's doing is perfect. We should have more of a European society and a European economy. But yeah. Europe is toast. It's been toast for about 10 years, and people are just now realizing it. And part of this is that they, when Trump, thankfully, started cutting off funding to Ukraine and is now talking about cutting off all military aid altogether. When they started preaching that in Europe, I was just on not a BBC, it was called The Pulse in the UK, mm-hmm. and talking about this topic. And one of the things that I found it made me ecstatic was the fact that Europeans were instantly defiant. Like the Europeans, like, we don't want this war either. It's kind of divided like America. Like half of the country supports Ukraine, the other half realizes it's a money laundering scam. And that there's no chance of winning that war on Ukraine's side. It's just a matter of capitulation. Right. That was really good for me. Now, the war that people still have a lot of confusion around, and the conflict that everyone seems to be kind of dismissing. The more we talk about Ukraine, the less we talk about Israel, Palestine. What's developing in the Middle East right now, and what just happened in Yemen? What are you hearing on your side of things?
United States launched an unprovoked attack on Yemen. They said, "Oh, Yemen's interfering with freedom of shipping, freedom of navigation." Well,
which they had. I mean, they legitimately have.
They had prior to that. Mm-hmm. But when Donald Trump, through Steve Witkoff, negotiated a ceasefire between Hamas and Israel, Yemen, the Houthis, then said, "Oh, great, we're cutting off attacks. We're ending attacks." They stopped because they said, "Hey, we're going to support the ceasefire." That was the only reason they were doing the attacks in the first place, was to try to get Israel to stop attacking the Palestinians in Gaza. Mm-hmm. So now that those attacks stopped, and we've now learned through this idiotic posting of or chats from Signal that Jeffrey Goldberg has access to, that we just decided there was no action by the Yemenis that was requiring a response from us. We could have done it a month later, as both at least the deputy, the chief of staff for Tulsi Gabbard said, Joe Kent, I believe is his name. Mm-hmm. And there was another, Ratcliffe said it could delay. So there wasn't any urgency. But we wanted to do this to show Iran what a bunch of tough guys we are. So we launched it. And so on March 15th, the Ides of March, we launched this attack. We started bombing targets in Yemen. And, some of Hegseth's posts are just idiotic with respect to this, because, we're not going to be like Biden, who is just doing, bombing shacks. No, the Biden people actually were trying to destroy, and I'm not a defender of Biden, but they were also stupidly attacking the Houthis. And I say stupidly because they're using mobile missiles that we cannot find, locate, and hit those mobile targets with any kind of effectiveness. And that's what Biden proved. And the other thing Biden exposed was how limited our ships are in terms of their ability to sustain an attack. We got that carrier strike group there in the Red Sea. It comes in with 2 destroyers and a cruiser. Well, each of those destroyers has 96 missiles, vertical launch system missiles. They are tubes in the deck. The hatches pop open, the missiles come straight out. The problem is, once you fire them, that tube's empty. And this is not like you out at the gun range where, hey, my magazine's empty, I'll put a new magazine in. Doesn't work that way. Those ships have to go to a port and where there are missiles stored, and then a crane can put those missiles into the tubes. So once you start firing these, they can run out of ammunition and they have to withdraw, which makes us look weak anyway. So, this is now what the Trump administration's doing. And they're going to find out, just like Biden, that, they've blown up some, they may have hit some military targets, but they're killing civilians.
Yes.
And the images coming out of Yemen, they're hitting apartment buildings. There are dead babies. And it's like, and for what? And this was all to do a demonstration as a warning to Iran. That's what this is about. And it's just
show of force.
Yeah, this is the guy who thinks he's a bodybuilder flexing muscles in front of a mirror.
Right. Now, with these messages, first of all, the signal's not secure. I don't, it's
Right.
been known for a long time. Signal's not secure. There's tremendous debate. I personally believe that, you give things a little time, you see what happens. But I personally believe that this was not an accident. I think that this was potentially an ambush, if you will. I don't know, so I don't claim to know. There's plenty of people online say, "Oh, for sure they included him here," or they're fake screenshots. All these things are legitimate. Like, I'm not I'm not God. I don't know the answer, but it
Right.
certainly seems suspect to me that a reporter from the Atlantic, of all places, Goldberg's been widely known as a disinformation spreader. What do you think happened there? Is that an accident? Was that on purpose? Is that an exposure op? Like, what's your personal opinion on that?
All I know is there are 3 possibilities. Possibility number 1, Goldberg was in Mike Waltz's address book on Signal and was accidentally added, either by Waltz or some idiot staffer. Option 2, Waltz deliberately added him because he wanted this information out to show how tough the United States was going to be on Yemen. And this was naive enough to think that Goldberg would write something favorably. Option 3 is that the conversation was hacked and Goldberg got access through it because through intelligence methods, maybe through Mossad. That's a possibility. But I think the most likely is he was inadvertently added through just carelessness.
I think those 3 options are completely logical, and I think that's the main debate. Is like, was it on purpose? We always have that debate online, like because we don't have that kind of background, and the guys who do have that kind of background generally come in and go, "Here's the options. I don't know." I think "I don't know" is the most misused or underused statement on the internet right now. Everyone knows, right?
Yeah.
I don't know is a good place to start, and then break it down into options like that. Nonetheless, it's not good. Maybe a 4th option could be that he was hoping that Goldberg would write about this immediately, and then they wouldn't have to bomb Yemen. But that's the real. I don't really care about the leak. I think all this. I mean, our politics are completely fake. We all know that.
Yeah,
This is kabuki theater at the highest level. The purpose, right? So you said it's a show of force to Iran, because at the same time, I think we were sending at least 1, if not 2, carriers near Iran while we were bombing Yemen.
What this is doing is trying to establish a predicate.
Mm-hmm.
That we've had to attack Yemen because they're firing these missiles. Well, they weren't firing any missiles until we attacked again. We blamed those missiles on Iran. So therefore, we're going to have to attack Iran to stop the attacks on Israel. That's the logic.
So it all goes back to defense of Israel.
Yes.
So in that conflict right now, we have this deal being cut with Egypt to accept the Palestinians there for a period of time and let them back. Do you know a lot about what's happening with this? By the way, it's just a conversation. It's not a fully recognized agreement yet. But what is happening with the Palestinians right now?
Yeah, no, they're getting killed. They're stuck in Gaza, They have no place to go, and frankly, I don't think they'd accept going to Egypt, and I don't think Egypt would accept letting them come in. So this is, it's a bloody mess, is what it is.
Yeah, they're cornered, and they have no place to go. And the saddest thing, and I'll just reiterate this every time we talk about this topic, between Palestine and Libya and now Syria, there are more Christians dying in the Middle East right now than there are anywhere else in the world, and
Right.
not a single, not Fox News, not CNN, no one is talking about the amount of Christians that are dying.
Right.
So let's move into Syria, because there's a really big moment coming up in Syria right now. This was, I had an interview on here months ago predicting what would happen, and it was completely correct. And the interesting thing is, right now, the rebels, which are actually ISIS in disguise, we're being told they're the good guys. They're totally ISIS and Al Qaeda.
Correct.
They're moving into a region right now, and I forget the name of it. It's a mountainside community. It's the last bastion of Aramaic. So these are some of the original followers of Jesus Christ that speak Aramaic, that praise Jesus in the middle of Syria. Syria is like 12 or 15% Christian. Libya was 40%, probably at 30% now. But this is a big area for Christian worship. And Syria right now, you mentioned that the former president of Ukraine fled to Russia. Assad has fled to Russia. And now we have an installed regime there that is literally killing Christians all throughout Syria.
Yes.
What updates do you have in Syria right now?
And nothing beyond that. The chaos continues. That Jelani al-Shram is, I guess he's calling himself al-Shram now, is getting crossways, I think, with Turkey. This hasn't quite turned out as Turkey envisioned. And Turkey's talking about boosting air defense systems in Syria, which Israel's saying they won't allow to happen. The Russians have moved out of they still hold a base, an air base in northern Syria, but they're now extending the perimeter because they've got so many refugees that have come in. So the Russians are moving actively to protect a lot of these Syrians, who are many of whom are Christian.
Yes.
So the Russians at least are working to protect the Christians. And, again, the West should be damned to hell for backing someone like Jelani that murders Christians, when Bashar al-Assad, with all of his faults and flaws, he defended Christians, he defended Alawites, defended Shia against these radical Islamists, the Sunni-backed Takfiris.
And Israel has their hands all through Syria as well. Like very well-known thing. This is part of the greater Israel plan. This was mapped out in 2007. They came out and said, well, these are our next 7 wars, and they all happen to be exactly in alignment with the greater Israel plan.
Yeah, exactly.
But again, you bring up a good point. Assad is known by. I actually had dinner with a Syrian Christian about 2 months ago in Palm Beach. And talking to him about his faith in the middle, I said, how could you be a Christian in the middle of Syria? He goes, we have pockets that are nothing but Christians. He's like, we actually worship the true Bible. And hearing these stories, nothing bothers me more than the Christian Zionist mindset of, just destroy them all and give Israel everything. I did a video on this on Rumble that any of you can watch. But Russia has become very much anti-Zionist as a movement. So they are trying to get all the Christians back into Russia. So you have these people being displaced by a war that's being fought over through proxy for the purpose of a foreign nation that dominates our politics, media. The entire legal system is run by Zionists.
Right.
Where do we go from here? I mean, Trump is he's in a difficult position. He has been from the beginning. Financially, he walked into a booby trap. I mean, it was set for him over a 4-year period. Yellen really slammed the door financially. So we're going to go through a topsy-turvy time in that area. Short-term pain, I do believe long-term gain will come from it. What are the political implications right now? What Trump is cornered. He must support Israel, right? He must support Israel at this point.
He doesn't have to. He's chosen to. And this is the power of the AIPAC, the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, the lobby. I thought actually that Trump, because he wasn't going to face election again, would have been able to free himself from the clutches of the Zionists. But they got their hooks into him too deep, and they have surrounded him with other pro-Zionist, ardent Zionists.
The whole administration.
Michael Waltz, Pete Hegseth. So that's going to end up destroying Donald Trump's presidency. I think while he's on the right track to negotiate with Russia and seek a peace there, if he follows through on his threats to attack Iran, that will destroy the agreement with Russia.
Yes.
And so and then Trump, who vowed to be a president not to get us into meaningless wars, will get us into one of the biggest wars since World War II.
Well, it hasn't happened yet, so we'll pray it doesn't happen. And
yes, I'm with you.
There's very good movement in this. The executive order he put out yesterday actually has a clause in it, which, depending on how you interpret the clause, and it's just an EO, but it has a clause in there that basically says no more foreign involvement politically through financing in our campaigns. Right. Saw that this morning. That was one of the more positive things that I've seen. So maybe we're watching. I try not to pigeonhole people based on like the immediate response. I'm hoping and praying that during this process that Trump is working a plan in the back end, saying, I'm bending a knee now. Here's what we're going to do for you. But in the end, you really have to remove AIPAC, which most people forget used to be called the American Zionist Council before they changed their name during Kennedy's time. If we can remove that political influence and financial influence on politics, then I think we can get somewhere in Israel. So I see a lot of hope in this scenario. Of course, from a 2-foot view, this is not good. There's nothing good. But looking beyond that, I think that there are steps being taken that over time will alleviate the clutches from Israel on America.
I hope you're right.
Me too. I'm saying that because I'm hoping that. But at the same time, I'm also trying to be a realist and balance out what I want and hope to happen versus what is actually happening. In these conflicts right now, Trump came in, I remember, and I'm a huge supporter of Donald Trump. We have never had a better candidate. There was not a better candidate at the time. There hasn't been a better populist candidate since Kennedy. And it's the best we have. I just don't believe in the election process anymore. I think everything is a stage. And your background would probably allow you to talk a lot more about that. But I think that during this time frame that Trump, he campaigned on, I just need 24 hours. I'll end all the wars in 24 hours. Dangerous statement to make. I don't think anyone took it seriously. No one can end a war in 24 hours. It's just bureaucratically not possible. Okay. But I think he is doing a good job in this first. It hasn't even been in office 3 months. I think he's doing a great. It is 2 months now. I think he's doing a great job at mitigating a terrible situation. And I think we continue to support him nonstop because we have nothing else to support. But at the same time, where do you see this thing going? Do we go to war with Iran? Does this end up happening? I mean, that's
it sure looks like that. It looks like that's where we're headed, unfortunately.
What would be the purpose besides defending Israel? What would be
we think it's defending Israel, but that's the point. It's not going to defend Israel. It's going to destroy Israel.
Correct.
Because we believe falsely that Iran is weak, that it has no air defense system, and that we can easily go in and bomb it. And those are false assumptions. And the only way I can prove there are false assumptions is when we do it and we get our ass kicked.
Yeah.
And then we go, who knew? Who knew? Well, I knew.
Well, and you've probably known that, we keep hearing they're about to build a nuclear weapon. The first time that was published was 1984. So since 1984, we have heard that they are on the verge of a nuclear weapon. Do they have a nuclear weapon or not, in your opinion?
No, they don't. The fatwa that was issued by Ayatollah Khamenei in 2003 stipulated that to get a nuclear weapon would be a sin. And they're religious, so they're not going to commit sin.
Huh. Man, this has been an awesome half an hour, Larry. It's always great to talk to you because you get right to the point, and I love that about you.
Well, listen, thanks, Eric. Happy to do it again.
Absolutely. Larry Johnson, where can everybody find you online? How can they get in touch with you? How can they read your articles and watch your videos?
Real easy, sonar21.com, SONAR21.com.
Give it a look, subscribe, do what you got to do. Larry Johnson, always great to have you on the show. Look forward to having you back in a little while. Let's get some updates, and hopefully they'll be a lot more positive than what we're seeing right now. We're praying that that's going to happen. I believe that's going to happen, but who knows? That's not in my hands. It's in the hands of politicians and God ultimately. So Larry Johnson, thank you so much for coming again today, brother. Always a pleasure to have you on. Thanks, you everyone, Eric, for watching today, and we'll see you next time.